mentioned all 5 generations are here, and that would be the oldest would be the traditionalists, which are born prior to 1946. I'm not that guy. I feel comfortable saying I'm a baby boomer. So, and also my picture in there, it's a good picture, but I need to get some sun. So I just had a couple recollections I wanted to share here too. I think really real quickly in terms of my framing of this and working in terms of cross generations and particularly looking at bringing younger people in as staff members and working with our students is that as a director of career leadership development at ACAPAT, it's really kind of cool space because what we do is we help, we're student facing and we really help students learn how to conduct an effective job and internship search, and so we do a lot of teaching on resumes and they're developing their brand and those types of things. But we also work with a lot of employers, so we're kind of between that space between students and employers by sponsoring different events such as career fairs, things like that. So I always get one of the parts of my job I love the most is I get the opportunity to talk to employers about what they're looking for. You know, are their needs being met? What are the skill sets the students have? What are they lacking? Those types of things. And I often get to talk to students about what their fears are and those types of things. So I want to share those perspectives with you as well. A couple cautionary pieces here. I don't like to be put in boxes myself, right? So I don't like the baby boomer, that type of thing. So I think it's really a slippery slope to go down once we start stereotyping. It's one thing to generalize, but I think to start stereotyping is something that's not always good to do. I don't want people to look at me and say, well, you're terrible at technology or whatever that is. Maybe true, but I don't like to be branded that way as well. And that's what I'm hearing a lot of our students say as well. Oftentimes I might think to somebody that's a younger person like millennial, well, you're good at technology, and there's some students that aren't. This is not their forte and that type of thing as well. So I think and also I wonder sometimes what's developmental versus what's generational. I've talked to people my age that sort of beat up on the younger generation, and I do recall when I was 18, 19, that people beat up on us as well in terms of like, you don't have the work ethic that we did and those types of things as well. So I think that's a caution I do like to say, because I know I look back at some things I wrote early in my career when I was in my 20s and I'm kind of embarrassed. My writing skills weren't as good then as they are now. My public speaking skills weren't as good as then as they are now. And my just simple interpersonal skills and talking to people weren't as good then as they are now. So I think I've developed over the years, and so oftentimes, is it developmental or is it generational? Do you label people? I see a lot of our students that are bright, they're driven, but they don't believe in themselves. And hopefully when they graduate, they're going to believe in themselves much more so, and they're going to be ready to conquer the world as well. So there's something, though, that I think there's some change that happened in society. One author I like to read is Daniel Pink. And Daniel wrote this book called Free Agent Nation, probably about 15 years ago or so. And he talked about this social contract between employer and organization changing. And it's really the old social contract, and it goes back to the 1940s and 50s and 60s of a company man or company woman. And so basically the company would provide, up here typically, or the organization would provide security to the employee and keep them working through lean times, and the employee would provide loyalty in return, and the employee would stay with them as well. And he said basically that social contract is eroding. And it started eroding back when major corporations started laying off lots of people back in the 80s and 90s or so. That social contract's breaking, but it's getting to be a little bit more egalitarian, so to speak, but it's the organization provides opportunity and the individual provides talent. Right? So that's been going on for 20, 30 years or so, and that erosion of a social contract, and I think we see that in loyalty. I can go back 20 years ago that, those of us in the university setting, we typically left jobs at the end of a semester or at the end of an academic year. You sort of just didn't look for jobs, new opportunities during the year. That was the industry, so to speak. And now it's pretty common for people to like, where did Harry go? They're gone type of thing. And people are leaving any time during the year, even people teaching classes, etc. So sometimes that sense of loyalty isn't there in the same manner. And I often talk to employers and people maybe a little bit older than millennials, maybe Gen Xers or so, who are supervising, they talk about that lack of loyalty. What I hear from a lot of our Gen Zers, and what I hear from our millennials is that they feel like they're really loyal, but they're loyal to the opportunity, they're loyal to that development as well. So I think that's kind of interesting to kind of think about. It makes me think about that as well. I do want to share real quickly, there's a national study. NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and it's sort of the preeminent organization that studies the hiring of people coming out with their bachelor's degrees into any type of industry, private sector, public sector, government work, whatever. And they did a study where they actually asked employers to say, there's 8 competencies that NACE has identified through a study of employers across the country, 4,000 employers or so. And so really they identified things like professionalism and work ethic, oral and written communication skills, cultural fluency. So they divided, to be a good professional, you need to have these 8 competencies. And so what they did though is they studied this, they actually asked employers to say, rank each competency by what's essential, and rank them about what you're getting, the graduate proficiency in that. So like there's 2 different rankings. And so interestingly enough, professionalism and work ethic, the employers said it's 95% essential. So 95% of the employers interviewed said, yeah, professionalism and work ethic is absolutely essential. And they ranked our graduates' proficiency as really 46.5% that they have it. So it's sort of like half, about half there. So there's a gap in a sense of skills or qualities that the employers perceive. Oral and written communication skills, 93% essential, 49% proficient. Again, gap in what employers are saying that way as well. Critical thinking, problem solving, 99% essential, 60%. Teamwork and collaboration is a little closer, and I think we hear oftentimes that our millennials and our Gen Zers are really good at teamwork and collaboration. That's what's happening in the school districts, et cetera. The employers said it was 98% essential, and they said our graduates have 85% proficiency in that, so that's closing the gap a little bit there. There's 2 areas that actually they ranked our graduate proficiency as higher than what they considered essential. So the application of technology, they said it was 53% essential. That surprised me a little bit. It felt a little low to me. But they said 68% of our graduates have proficiency in it. And then global multicultural fluency, 22% essential and 25% proficiency. So there's some gaps there as well. Now, interesting piece, I read something as well, because I think this plays into it, is that there was a study that I saw 6 months ago on the National Chamber of Commerce website that talked about there's less of a skills gap than there's actually a skills articulation gap. So in other words, young people don't know how to talk about the skills that they have. And I see lots of students with their resume development. I do a lot of mock interviews. It is prevalent. Students don't know the skills they have. And a real simple example, one of the jobs I did in college years ago was I bartended, and I learned a lot from that. I learned how to small talk. I learned how to multitask in a fast-paced environment. I learned how to provide exceptional customer service. I learned how to have difficult conversations. These are all transferable skills that I needed at any job in the future, and yet my resume said that I mixed drinks and I waited on customers. No kidding, But I see that 9 out of 10 student resumes that I see. So definitely I know that students don't know how to articulate the skills. A lot of them are pretty humble, and they say, oh shucks, I just did what I had to do, right? So they don't know how to really articulate their skills as well. What I did, I've got my opinions, but what I did is in a couple weeks preceding this, I just really interviewed a number of employers. We had a career fairs last week, and I picked people's brains, and I interviewed a number of students, and to kind of give you their kind of perspective about what are some good things that you're doing as an employer that and it's more focused on really the younger generations, the Gen Zers were born after 97, and the Millennials that were born between 77 and 97. So what works in terms of attracting and kind of retaining younger employees? And then I asked the students, what works that organizations do that attract you? So a couple of different perspectives. And I don't think there's any magic bullet here at all. I think it's probably a multifaceted approach. But one of the things that several employers talk to me about is that there is some tension between generations. That's one of the things that happens in the workforce. Just like any kind of, whether it's race-based or anything other kind of diversity, gender-based, etc., there is in fact tension. So recognize that, and one of the roles of the managers, they said, is we need to make sure we get the best out of our people, and they're bringing all of themselves to that role as well. So their role is to help employees move beyond the labels and that type of thing. One way they do that a number of employers shared with me is that they really work on building collaborative relationships and teams. And so I know as a baby boomer, I feel fairly competent in technology, but I'd say 3-4 times a week I'm stumped by something, right? And my younger staff who are millennials helped me out tremendously. So this isn't the old guy mentors the young person, but it really is two-way, right? That's often two-way, and it's like my younger staff help me daily. And I'm not sure I'm helping them as much, to be honest, but I think I am, but it's probably more strategy I'm helping them with, and I think that they probably help me with a lot of other things as well. I think what generally in terms of training, onboarding, all those types of things, one of the employers said, keep messaging short and sweet. Particularly, this is a retailer, they were talking about, simple to the point messages, but even in terms of onboarding and training and just ongoing education of employees, use videos. It's not the old days like, when I was trained. I remember when I started working in this field in 1980, before computers, and basically it was like a stack of files on my desk, and my boss said, here's your office, read through these files, and then that'll be your training program. Now that was weak, but it felt normal, right? To me, it's like, okay, I'll just figure this out. I'm on my own type of thing. Innovative learning, a couple employers mentioned about, and this is really related, but really just focusing on kind of peer-to-peer learning, informal coaching, simulations, case studies, anything that can kind of make it come alive versus just sort of a narrative from a talking head somewhere as well, as I'm doing right now, right? And social media engagement is absolutely critical, not just in recruiting younger employees, but actually retaining them and simply building that sense of community as well. So that's some of the guidance I got from the employers, and I think a lot of it's probably right on. And the students are really saying, collaborative workspace. I heard that from a lot of students. We have about 20-25 students that work for us in intern roles that run a lot of our services and programs, and collaborative space is absolutely critical. We don't want to be stuck in a cubicle where we're divided from people as well. Flexible work schedule and casual dress code. That's kind of big for a lot of the students as well. It's not always real doable in some industries and that type of thing as well. This is interesting. Building rapport is extremely important, and many students said, I want to have a mentor. Formalize it. I don't want to wait for somebody to kind of come along very serendipitously, but just, I want to have a mentor, so if you can formalize that and assign me with somebody, that's what I'm looking for as well. One student said, I'm used to talking to adults. I was the only child and my parents involved me with everything. I'm really used to it, so I'm looking for that in any organization I join. How do they know when somebody's going to be a mentor? Sincerity, and basically that's really important. That sincere, authentic relationship where that person can also say, I struggle with this too, that type of thing. Regarding social media, a couple students actually said they really liked the quick trips approach, and they said really it engages with the audience with humor, relevant memes. I wasn't even sure exactly what a meme was. So I think I know, but I don't want to say. And direct, timely engagement. So you can't just have a Facebook page. Facebook is starting to be old school now, but you can't just put something on Facebook or whatever and just not reply for another month, right? It has to be really timely. You have to watch it daily. You have to respond really promptly, and it has to be sincere engagement. Type of thing. So they mentioned one of the companies out there was like the student put in there, how can I get a job like yours? And they just joke back, well, I'm not going to give you my job type of thing. So it was this sort of funny exchange on that as well. And they felt that was really authentic and really sincere type of thing. Clear expectations. I heard this from a lot of students. They're used to syllabi in classes. They're used to saying this is what it takes to succeed. They're used to that real clear pathway for success. So clear job ads. A lot of students grumble about job ads being not kind of coherently written or not really putting everything out there that's really needed. And they talked about the application process and the timeline. I hear a lot of grumbles from students that sometimes employers don't get back to them for weeks, sometimes months, when they've applied for a position, and they just want that clarity of response. And so that doesn't feel sincere to them as well. Prompt communication again, and a clear pathway for success. So if I'm joining a company or joining an organization, how do I know what success is? How do I know what the pathway is to like promotion or whatever that is? They're looking for that kind of guidance as well. And realistic expectations for performance. A number of students talked about watching their parents have work out of balance. and really being stressed with work and maybe having some medical problems with that. And they talked about, I want to work hard, but I want to know that there's balance in there some way. So maybe there's going to be some peak times of the year that I'm going to work extra, but are there some quieter times of the year that I can work a little less? How do I get balance in there as well? They really want to do well. They really want to perform. I quite frankly love working with the Gen Zers and the Millennials. I love it. I think it's really, it inspires me. I'm not one of those, I have this Pollyanna view because I work with a lot of best and brightest. So I look at most of the students I see and I think I wouldn't have competed well with them back in 77, you know, type of thing. So I think that's some of the main advice that they really gave, and I think just to provide a little bit of context that way as well. So I can turn it over to the next speaker? Or?
Yep, we'll do questions and answers at the end.
Okay.
So if you jot those questions down that you have to run, otherwise we will go from there.
Sounds good.
Because we'll have the panelists. So thank you, Rob.
97, for those of you wondering. I'm 22 years old, so totally an appropriate question to ask. So I am right in the middle, but like a lot of you, or some of you, I am a Sirius XM fan. Who has Sirius XM in the building? Yeah, so I'm a 70s on 7, 80s on 8, 90s on 9, and pop rocks. So I'm a Gen X or millennial with a old soul. But so what I really wanted to talk about today is that change is good. So every generation that we go through is going to be another change. Every 10 years we have a new generation that's coming up, and that new generation is bringing new ideas, new philosophies, and new systems into place that can help businesses grow. And ultimately, that's going to be the generation that you're going to be selling to. So if you're not bringing those new ideas on board, you're only going to be lagging yourself behind, lacking growth, because that's the people you are going to market to. So if you give an example of a few generations ago, people wanted to work from home, people wanted to work remotely, and people thought that was absolutely crazy. Now look at it, we have people working for companies all over the world, remotely, and just through the use of technology that has changed companies as well as efficiencies. So it's now easier and cheaper to get labor anywhere around the world because of that. Now, all jobs aren't a good fit for that, but that's just one example of how new generations coming into the workforce have changed businesses now today. Along with bringing in new ideas, people my age, we do get a lot of stereotypes of we can't communicate, we are stuck behind our phones, we do this or do that. But like the previous speaker mentioned, we want to be broken out of those boxes and higher skill sets. Somebody like me, I like to think I have good communication skills, other good skill sets that bring to the job that I don't have those kind of qualities that people put me in that box. So just a reminder, just the higher skill sets of people moving forward, not necessarily zoning people into the different generations that they fall into. So I'm going to dive into some of the experiences that I have had through different jobs. I started in high school working at a bank, BMO Harris Bank, and I was the youngest employee ever at that branch. It was a curricular opportunity through my high school, so I left school early to go. But my first week on the job was pretty weird. I was working with 40, 50, 60-year-old tellers that thought, you know, this kid can't count money, this kid can't do this, how is he going to talk to customers, how is he going to sell credit cards, how is he going to send somebody over to a banker so he can get more money. And so it was a challenge for me to, again, break down those barriers, to tell them, yes, that I can, and not only tell them, but show them. So I worked my way to leading sales in my second month, which ultimately kind of broke down all those barriers. And instead of calling me the baby, they were calling me the sales guy in the bank. So just kind of, again, breaking down those barriers. And one of the jokes that they said when I was continuing to drive sales, they started asking me questions about how I was talking to generations my age. Because they didn't know how to talk to generations my age who were coming in. People my age didn't know much about credit cards, how it could help them. They just thought this 50-year-old teller was just trying to lock them into some crazy deal, get them into debt. And by me just speaking fluently with people in my generation, I was just able to communicate with them at an easier basis. So communicate to your younger generation because they have different skill sets, like I mentioned before, about how to communicate and market to the younger generation. So I want to move into then when I was at Whitewater, how I got into my role at Geneva Supply. So I started out as an intern at Geneva Supply my last year of college, which I didn't really know was going to be my last year because I was a junior at the time, and then decided to graduate early. So I did it in 3 years, which was thank you, amazing opportunity. We have one person clapping in the room.
Well, she is clapping.
She is a clapper.
Yeah, she is the clapper.
That's awesome.
But so I ended up as an intern at Geneva Supply, and I think through that experience, if you have the opportunity to open up internships at your company, I would totally do so. The job market out there is very lean right now. There's not a whole lot, or there's a lot of jobs out there, there's not a lot of talent out there. So if you can bring in internships and get them in early, you can keep them here in the community and eventually have a job. And it's a good way to see if they work out or if they don't. It's a cheap way to do that, a cheap A/B test. Yeah, this intern worked. Yeah, this one didn't. You know, at the semester, let one go. Yeah, it happens. But through my internship, I found value in the different opportunities here in the community and at Geneva Supply. During my internship, I also applied as I was thinking about graduating to 4 other companies, and I did receive offers from them. And the fun fact was that all those offers were a larger salary than the offer I took. And all of my friends in college were asking me why the heck I did this. You're crazy. You're a fool. What are you going to be doing in Delavan, Wisconsin? We're all going to be in Chicago, Milwaukee in the next year or two. You're going to be missing out. And they're still in college, so I'm not missing out on anything. I can still visit them on the weekends, and they're only 15 minutes away, so I don't know what they're really talking about. But what I found at Geneva Supply was that they offered more value to me, which wanted me to get more value back. The other companies, I was just going to be another number. The value to me wasn't going to be as great, and I knew that my value back to them, because of that, wouldn't be as much. So it would be doing them a dishonest for me to go there, and they were doing a dishonest to me of giving me less value, which that happens in some companies. There's just different ranks. Geneva Supply is one of the companies where you can come in, work really hard, and move up the ladder because we're growing so fast. So I had offers in Milwaukee, Brookfield, suburbs of Milwaukee, and so what made me stay in Delavan, at Geneva Supply, was the fact that just the different benefits and things that they offered. Like we mentioned, the other jobs, most of them were going to be cubicles. Geneva Supply had actual nice new offices, which Jeff and Melissa designed. They're pretty awesome. You should come check them out, definitely. But also the ability to be involved in a nonprofit, the ability to have paid volunteer time off. All those different things kind of impacted my decision on where I wanted to be in the next 5 years, because that's kind of how I'm always thinking is, where do I want to be in the next 5 years? And Geneva Supply had the best opportunity for growth and just potential of value back to me in the next 5 years. So I want to end this again by just saying, keep in mind that change is a good thing. If you're not adapted to change, you're only going to be falling behind the 8 ball. And I appreciate your guys' time today. Thank you.
17. I had graduated from UW Whitewater with a corporate communications degree, and I did not know what I wanted to do, like most people right out of school. So I actually took an internship with Lavelle in HR, and I thought this might be a good opportunity. When I very first started my internship, there was no opportunity to get hired on. They made that pretty clear. But I came on board pretty quick and kind of took over, so they offered me a job pretty quick. So that was awesome, right? So kudos to me, and I got to learn a lot, right? So it was was a great opportunity to do the internship and then get hired on because I learned so much. I was interviewing within my first week. It was a lot, but it was great. And then what happened in Whitewater, we actually have been growing so significant. We brought in at least 5 more interns after me. So internships that we've been talking about are so important. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, I'm Bridget Savaglia. I'm the recruiting manager for Lavelle, so I actually work in our Burlington facility, and then Jessica and I work really closely together at our Whitewater facility. I would echo both what Ron and Casey said earlier. It's a good segue to some of the things that we're going to talk about. I'm a little unusual. I'm heading into my 10th month at Lavelle, and last year at this time I was an assistant principal in the middle school in Geneva. So I have worn a lot of hats in my life, and so for my age, when I used to do workshops with educators, and I would say, raise your hand if you've had, more than 2 jobs. And I would be sometimes the only person in the room on my 11th job, which kind of fits a little bit more what people perceive millennials to have, and I think that brings a different perspective for me. Are you looking for someone who can bring you the skill set that you need? Or are you looking for what you're familiar with, what you're comfortable with? We all go for what's comfortable, and that's okay, but it's important for someone in the organization to push you to think about how can you go beyond that. So something that we can do next, if we go. Technology is, ironically, at least
Hey, Casey, you want to hit that button?
is one.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, we can do the next one.
Yep. Right?
Good job.
Point proven.
Yep. So I'm going to let Jessica talk a little bit specific to our Whitewater facility because that is a facility we wanted to share. Yep.
Perfect. So, like I said, I work out in our Whitewater facility. We've been out in Whitewater since 2001. Our owners actually decided to come out to Whitewater because we wanted to give access to opportunity to our college students. Being so close, we're only 5 minutes away. We have a lot of part-time workers that come to Lavelle and work flexible hours. So it's really nice for students to have an opportunity to pay off debt, pay off school. We hear drinking money, all that fun stuff. But it's an opportunity for us too in the environment that we work. So working in a manufacturing industry, we do a lot of repetitive work. So it gives opportunity to the students to only work 4 hours. They get to go back to school, and it's great for us because we have people who can come. We have lots of employees, right? So it's a win-win situation. We have about 50% of our workforce is actually part-time. So students, we have high school students. We also do have permanent employees too. Our ages vary from 16 to 70. So we have a lot of different generations that work at Lavelle. One of the challenges that we face, though, with having a lot of part-time heavy college students, high school students, is that we have high turnover rates, and we know that. We expect that. Students like to go back to their home, they go back to their home jobs. We have students that go to internships, right? So we have to be able to be prepared for that, and how can we help our students get the dream job that they want or an internship. So we do a lot of resume reviews, we do mock interviews, we help our students any way we can that, in order for them to get their dream job, right? So that's our job, to help them and to provide them with that access.
All right, we can do the next slide. So Ron touched on this, and I know Casey talked about it a little bit. This is just from the Pew Research Foundation. It's a really good resource if you're looking up some of that statistical information. What exactly is a boomer? What is a Generation X, the millennials, etc. There's lots of different, as Jessica referenced, we have a lot of different generations within our both of our facilities, and so how do you help navigate what that looks like, and how do you think about that? I appreciate that the previous speakers referenced this, and I would echo the same thing. I think as someone who maybe previously was in education and worked with middle schoolers and loved them, there's a perception of lots of different generations, and usually those stereotypes are there, but they're often very not true. And so I would encourage us to think about how can we kind of think beyond our perceptions of what for example, a millennial is capable of doing, what is a Gen Z, and even in the reverse, like the perception of like baby boomers and some of the other things. So it is true, I have a son who's a freshman in high school, and my husband's a couple years older. I like to exaggerate, but he's only a couple years older. Ellen knows my cousin. And my son will also go, okay, boomer, and my husband is like, that is not appropriate. So I'm just thinking about how can you be aware of differences, but how can you also bridge those gaps?
Okay, so the Millennial Effect. By 2020, millennials will make up more than half of the American workforce. That's an estimate, and we do see that. A lot of the culture has a lot of millennials. I'm a millennial. So it's how do we bridge those gaps, and we've been talking about that this entire time of how millennials strive for that feedback, and we'll talk more about that in the next slide too. But this is something that is new. Feedback is so important, and it's important that both the employer and the employee is receiving it in order to keep that retention and that loyalty.
So something that is kind of the focus of what we're going to share with you today is the idea of feedback. And there's definitely perceptions of that, and we're focusing on millennials because that's what we hear a lot in our workplace, and that conversation, and how do we kind of combat that and help us work together. So craving feedback. So the research shows that the millennial generation is looking for a responsive managerial style, which I think we heard that from both of our previous speakers. Ongoing relationships, and they are quick to jump ship if demands are not met. And I think Casey touched on that. It's really important that demands is not necessarily a salary. There's lots of other things that go into feeling fulfilled and engaged in your workplace. And that 29% of millennial workers are engaged. That's not a very high percentage. And that 44% of them are looking to move in the next 2 years. I would say that's even a little bit higher in my experience. So if you have 30 people in your workforce, 20 of them are part of this generation, 15, and like 2 or 3 are not engaged, and half of them are looking to leave in the next 2 years. Some of them are looking for opportunities. Sometimes it's about a culture fit. It's about those kind of things. So what can you do to improve a culture? What can you do to create a culture that helps sustain a younger workforce and help, in essence, this actually benefits everybody. It is not just a particular generation.
And we have found at Lavelle especially, feedback is so important, and even people who aren't interested or skilled at giving or receiving feedback will participate in the process and improve when they are working in a feedback-rich environment. And I can speak for myself and for my team how important it is to receive feedback, because if I don't hear anything, I think it's bad news. Am I not doing well? And then my fellow employees, it's so important for them to know I am on the right track. I am doing the right thing. It's important because they want to grow and they want to learn. And if we aren't sharing that, they're not concerned. They're just finding that balance of where they want to be.
So something that we feel is unique to Lavelle, which Jessica referenced, is that we do have a really high feedback culture. What does that mean? Sometimes when I am doing my recruiting, I'm talking with candidates and talking about be prepared. What we like to say at Lavelle is, if you're not getting feedback, you need to ask for it. And this is anybody in this organization. It's that you need to say, how are things going? Am I hitting the target here? Am I doing what's right? It is not uncommon to leave a meeting and have one say, hey, can I stop and give you a little bit of feedback? I was thinking X. It is something that just naturally has evolved as part of our culture, and we feel that it really strongly supports all of our workforce to help develop and grow. And so that's where it comes. That's systematic. We have a framework for what that feedback should look like. We have training that we do. We have professional development sessions. Our new managers go through some experiences to talk about how do you deliver feedback, how do you feedback up. So how do you talk up to a manager above you and give them feedback? How do you give feedback to a peer or someone on your team? How do you deliver feedback? And then how do you receive feedback, and what do you do with it? because in our organization, you're expected to take that feedback and do something with it, which I have to say, you know, coming out of K-12 education, and Ron echoed this a little bit earlier, our people exiting from school into the workforce, they're used to that. That's what they're expecting as well. They're expecting that they are going to get some direction and they need to adjust and reflect and move on. So it has to be, there has to be a framework. You have to talk about how to deliver it, and it has to be at any level of the organization.
Think of feedback as a gift that promotes. So professional development, you want to grow, you want to learn, you want to be better. Continuously improvement is something that we strive for. How do we make processes better? How do we make ourselves better?
So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So, and we'll see, this is a TED Talk, so I don't think the technology is on our side, but if you have a chance to check it out, and her name is totally escaping me, so if anybody, which, you know, that's, oh, does it? Let's see if it works.
Let me see. See if it does.
I mean, your face kind of says it all. You're prepared for what this conversation is going to be about. That's okay. We'll talk about it. So basically, she's teaching you how to give someone feedback that they smell, which as a former 5th grade teacher and middle school assistant principal, I did this as well. So I'm almost like at expert level for this, how do you do this kindly. But it's a really good example because how do you say to an adult that you work with that your odor
Hey,
is
when you have
offensive?
2 minutes, I need to talk to you.
Sorry.
2 minutes. Do it in a private setting, behind a closed door, not in front of other people, not in cube land. If you don't have a private environment, go to Starbucks, where other people you know are not there. You say, hey, I've noticed that you have an odor. That's it, people. 6 words. I've noticed you have an odor. We work in a small environment here, and I never want someone to not want to work with you because of this. Now, I know this is very awkward. It's awkward for me, and I'm sure it's awkward for you, but I'd much rather you hear this from me than somebody else. What are your thoughts? And then he'll say, or she'll say, whatever they say. I work out over lunch, and I don't shower, and oh my gosh, I can't believe you're telling me this, and right? Now, I have found that most people you say this stuff to, they actually know. Like, I was dating this guy a couple years ago, and it was before my book came out. And in the book, here's the book. In the book, there's a whole section on how to tell someone they smell. And he was reading the manuscript before it was printed, and his name was, well, I can't tell you his name, that wouldn't be fine, Bob. And Bob says to me, I think I'm in your book, right? And I was like, what? Because Bob smelled, so I told him he smelled, right? Because I'm candid. And he's like, I think I'm in your book. And I was like, oh no, I always teach that, it's not prudent to you.
So she has a little bit more. A lot of her materials are really good if you're looking for some of that guidance on how to have some of those difficult conversations. I think that word candid is really important. Part of what we use in our culture is that candid feedback. Sometimes it takes a little bit of adjustment. Like, people have a different way of delivering that feedback, but it is a really essential component in making sure that the organization is able to support and grow with anyone within those structures.
We have one last slide before we wrap up, but one of the things that we have found is casual work environment. Both speakers mentioned that before. It is important to the younger generation that they don't want to go out and spend $5,000 worth of dress clothes. It's nice to be able to come to an environment where you can wear jeans every day. We love that part of our job, right? That we get to come, we get to come every day and feel comfortable. So that's something that's really important in our culture, and we have been seeing that with other companies as well.
So thank you. We look forward to, feel free to come up and ask us questions or anything later. Thank you for our technical assistant.
Well, thank you, Bridget and Jessica. Our final speaker today is going to be
an organization called Business and Workforce Solutions. We are the consulting end of Gateway. A lot of folks don't know that we have that kind of stuff. We go into businesses and help them out with their issues. Everybody else works in machines and processes. I work with humans, which makes me the big weirdo there. Nobody knows what to do with me. I think we lost our slides. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I'm in the way. Okay. So what I want to do this morning is give you guys a little bit of awesome. Oh, thank you. Thanks for doing that. So we're not doing any generation bashing this morning, but I want to remind everybody that with every generation, we see generation bashing. I'm a boomer. Any more of my people in here this morning? My people. Okay, so we were supposed to be a generation of sociopaths. Apparently, the way we were brought up by our parents was going to create some horrible terror in the world. And then there were the Xers, and they were slackers. They weren't going to do anything because their parents paid for everything. And then there's the me generation, and those are the millennials. And apparently all they care about are themselves, and none of this stuff has actually happened, has it? Next slide, please. This is where we're at. This is as of 2015. Millennials were already 53% of the workforce. So when we start to complain about the millennials, let's just make it clear, most of the folks in the workforce are the millennials. They've had their kids, they've bought their houses, they have established their careers. Who are we complaining about, right? Next slide, please. Let's look at these generations, these 5 generations in the workforce. The first of these are members of the silent generation. And these folks are somewhere between 72 and 92, and they're still definitely out there. They're still definitely working. One of my great mentors in organizational psychology is a silent, and she's working and going strong. These are the folks who were just a little bit too young to participate in World War II toward the end of the generation, but too old to participate in the Summer of Love. So they have a tendency to be conformist, a tendency to say, I will do what the boss wants me to do. Why? Because that's the world they lived in. It's not as though brain chemistry changed over time. It's just the environment they lived in. Next slide, please. Generational characteristics. Let's remember that Warren Buffett is one of these folks, right? Pioneers in seeking and achieving equality, but also learning that compromise served them very, very well. A very strong family orientation, and here's where the silent generation part comes in. Suffer in silence, celebrate in public. First generation to know how to plan for retirement. The second generation to expect a college experience. And we'll go on to the next slide, please. The boomers, my people, born during the economic and baby boom following World War II. It's a huge generation, and it's split. I wasn't really old enough to participate in the Summer of Love, but I was there for disco. Okay, so, when you're talking about periods of 20 years, folks only have so much in common. Next slide, please. These were the radicals of the 60s and 70s, and the yuppies of the 80s and 90s. This generation, there are some interesting contrasts. Highest marriage rates, highest divorce rates. Early pursuers of both the counterculture and the American dream. This is the most affluent generation that we have, and likely the most long-lived of currently living generations, which means that the generations that follow might not live as long as the baby boomers. Next slide, please. Gen X were the baby busters. That's because fertility rates fell. I was in one of those last classes in grade school where we had 32 kids in a classroom, and then I looked behind me and there were like 17 sad kids in the classroom. Next slide, please. These are America's middle children. This is back here. That's a middle child down there. You see some. They grew up with Watergate and the energy crisis. They were most likely to live in a dual income family or with a single parent. Now, when I was going to school, Mom stayed home. When I was going to school, there was one kid whose parents were divorced and everybody talked about it. Right? So think about that. When they come to work, how different that is for them. Next slide, please. The millennials, these are the folks who experienced the rise of the internet, September 11th and the wars that followed, known as Generation Ys and Generation Y. Heavily dependent on technology. We say they're entitled and narcissistic. But I haven't seen more narcissists as a counselor among millennials than any other generation. Next slide, please. Generational characteristics are that they're multitaskers, they're connected via electronic means, they're seeking work-life balance. We talked about that, everything everybody said in here, right? Highly collaborative, love to work in teams, no particular expectation of privacy. Goodbye offices. They are socially aware and just. They want to know that their company does good in the world. I was working inside of a plastics company. They were having trouble with millennials and members of, we used to call them the next year generation, now Gen Z, who were coming in and quitting because they had seen pictures of fish dying having swallowed plastic. They're unimpressed with position and traditional success. So here you go, here's a promotion. I don't care. Next slide, please. Gen Z is more comfortable and reliant on technology than any other generation. They're highly individualistic and eschew labels. They don't join groups. A lot of associations are worried. They might be going out of business because this next generation doesn't join groups. Next slide, please. This is the group that has never known a world without the internet. Imagine that. I remember a world with black and white TV. Right? They have significant gaps in health indicators. This might be the first generation and tend to live shorter lives than their parents. Things are going on with this generation. They know multiple people with lifestyles that are unlike their own, and they're more likely to live, work, and attend school with diverse populations. And they do lack the guarantee of employment, even with significant education. Next slide, please. So what do all these people want from you? Relax. You know what? You're probably them, right? You're a member of one of these generations. Remember how they grew up. Think about the experiences they've had. And that's going to give you a lot of information about what they're looking for work. And use the platinum rule. We all know the golden rule, right? Do unto others. Yeah. Anybody know the platinum rule? Do unto others as they have themselves done unto. Which means you gotta ask them. Okay, next slide, please. Millennials want to coach more than they want to mentor. They want somebody to ask them questions. They don't want somebody to tell them, do this. They're looking for, they want you to can the annual performance appraisal. Oh, for God's sake, can the annual performance appraisal already? They want daily practical feedback, and they want their jobs as advertised. They want development, they want to say, and they prefer teams. This all according to the Gallup organization. Next slide, please. I love this comparison between what boomers say they want at work and what millennials say they want at work. Boomers want their paycheck. Millennials want to insist on serving their purpose. Boomers want job satisfaction. Millennials want their employers to develop them. Boomers want a good boss. And the millennials want a good coach. Boomers want their review and their raise to go along with it. But millennials want a daily conversation about their performance and their prospects. And that's a lot of work for supervisors. And what I say to supervisors about that is, at some point somebody said, hey, you want this job, it pays a little bit more, it has some position associated with it, people are going to look up to you. And that's the mantle of leadership. Those are the diamonds, right? You wanted the diamonds, you got to wear them, they're heavy. You have to talk to people about their performance. Right? Boomers say, don't take my office, while millennials say, don't take my fun. Boomers say, I worry about my job, and millennials say, I worry about my life. Next slide, please. generation by generation, may I suggest that you work on keeping employees engaged. With silence, we can talk about keeping these folks active. These are the keepers of your organizational history. In a lot of ways, they're the keepers of the history of their professions. They're the keepers of the organization's relationships. They have influencer status in the world. These are great people to talk about what do you want to have be your legacy inside of the organization. We can work with you on creating that legacy. And if we go to the next slide, boomers, hey, hang on tight, because these folks are starting to think about what's next for them. Provide flexibility for them and offer them some perks. Encourage succession activities. And start encouraging succession activities not this year, but 5 years ago. Give them some time to create that succession. And address complaints about younger managers. Oh, kids these days, right? Please go on. With Gen X, it's a matter of showing folks a road to success. Remember, these are America's middle children, and they're looking at Marsha, and wondering, when do I get there? Okay. Appeal to their entrepreneurial tendencies, their tendencies to want to grow in the world. Next slide, please. When we're combining generations, may I suggest reverse mentoring and up-coaching? So, does anybody here do that? This is where you have younger employees mentor employees who have been there for a long time in things that the younger employees know because they're closer to their educations. Consider really instituting a great deal of organizational learning and making organizational learning a goal inside of your company. And you can do this by creating learning academies within your organization. A lot of folks don't like seeing this. People of my generation don't like seeing this. Moving toward a flatter organizational structure, where the old-fashioned, the career ladder becomes a career lattice. I can move from here to here. I don't have to move up. And discourage generation bashing. Okay, I'm a boomer, but okay, boomer is an epithet. Okay, that's exactly what it is. And when we're talking about diversity, you're trying to create a more diverse and accepting organization. Combine generational strengths. Put folks together on teams who are unlike one another. And don't forget to practice servant leadership. And that servant leadership is when we turn the organization on its head and we get everybody focused on the customer instead of sitting around and talking about our differences as people inside of the company. Okay, next slide, please. Look, there's a big difference between age-related experience and generational difference. Okay, and we got to keep that in mind. If we go to the next slide, we can play a little game. To which generation do you ascribe impulsivity? Which generation is an impulsive generation? If we start talking about millennials and Gen Z, yeah, well, that's because that's about youth, right? When we look at entitlement, we talk about a younger generation in the workplace, that's about youth. Or what about when we talk about change resistance, stuck in their ways? That's about having been in the workplace for a while, right? If we go on to the next slide. Let's just stop blaming the kids. There are likely more millennials in this room than any other group. The eldest millennials are in their 30s. They've had their kids or bought their houses. They've reached the top of their careers. Next slide, please. So I'm going to ask you to hit another button. The boomers took all the good stuff and left us with a pile of debt. Gen X homebuyers built the largest, most expensive homes in U.S. histories. Okay, boomer, that's an epithet. If you just hit the next button, please. And then the other one, they're old, they don't embrace or understand technology. Next button, please. Really? Because, next slide. Steve Wozniak is 69. I think he understands technology. Next slide, please. Mark Tarpening is 55 and helped build electric cars. Next slide, please. Facebook CEO Sheryl Sandberg is 50. So, no, not necessarily. Next slide. I'm going to leave you with two wonderful words. The first of these is phenomenology. And what that means is that every person is phenomenal. Every person is absolutely unique. Let's focus on that inside of our organizations. And the next slide, anybody here speak German? Gemeinschaftsgefühl. The German psychologist Alfred Adler referred to this when he talked about the basic human motive. I don't care what generation you belong to. We all want to be valued by and connected to others because each of us brings something positively unique to the workplace. My mentor was an industrial psychologist, and he used to say, there's not another one like you on this mud ball. That's what creates not only mental health, but the health of companies. When we get the sense we're not valued, we get really squirrely really fast. Okay? So thanks a lot for listening, and forward talking with you this summer.